Let's bring in our panel now to talk about this, the politics behind the change at the top of the Pentagon. Josh Orton, senior advisor at Progressives United, Skyping in to us from Madison, Wisconsin. Also a former aide to Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid. And also Terry Jeffery, editor-in-chief of CNS News, coming to us from Washington, D.C. Guys, we heard Senator McCain there. He's expected to become the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, which will vet the next nominee to be the head of the Defense Department. What do you think, though, about this discussion, Josh, this inner circle in the Obama administration that's keeping folks like Chuck Hagel out?
Yeah, look, I think everyone understands that the White House has a very tight circle of aides around President Obama, and frankly, I think that the president deserves credit for nominating Secretary Hagel and fighting for his confirmation 2 years ago, which faced heavy Republican opposition, even though that Hagel is a former member of the Senate, so that's a bit unusual. Look, I think I saw a mention that it's always easier for the Department of Defense to transition from peace to war than from war back to peace. President Obama has been reining in President Bush's nation-building experiment from the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. And I think that there was maybe a clash of styles here. I don't think that detracts in any way from Secretary Hagel's service. I think he's a true patriot, a war hero, and I think he deserves a lot of credit.
Well, I don't think anybody's necessarily criticizing, well, maybe some folks are, but I think really the issue here is the fact that Hagel may have been pushed out by the Obama administration. What say you, Terry?
Well, actually, I think people ought to also take a look at some of the astounding ways in which Chuck Hagel, who's once a conservative Republican, and particularly on cultural issues, was a conservative once upon a time, completely accepted and bought off on ways that President Obama has been trying to use the military and the chain of command, which he controls as commander-in-chief, to advance some very significant cultural changes in America. I would just cite two. The first was that Chuck Hagel was involved in fact, I believe responsible for trying to prevent Catholic chaplains from doing their job in the United States military. He's even sued over this. His department told Father Ray Leonard at the Kings Bay submarine base in Georgia that they would arrest him during the government shutdown if he voluntarily administered the sacraments. They refused to tell me whether they would stop him from administering the last rites to a dying person, even though the president had signed the Pay Our Military Act before the government shutdown, which was designed to pay not only active duty military members, but also contractors like Father Leonard. The second thing is, as Secretary of Defense, Hagel signed off on a plan to completely integrate women into the combat forces of the U.S. military, including the special forces. And so this guy, Obama has taken the military in a much different direction than any previous president. And Chuck Hagel, for the most part, was willing to go along with him.
And Josh, so I'll let you respond to that. It seems as though, if you listen to Terry, that Hagel fully bought in to the Obama administration's initiative to maybe push some aggressive agenda items through the ranks of the military.
Well, look, I guess I would say that I think that culturally the military was always looking to modernize, and frankly, I give Secretary Hagel credit for working with the Obama administration to make sure those things happen. I'm a little flabbergasted by the notion that these are the issues that Secretary Hagel deserves criticism for. These were things that were coming anyway, right? These are things that a modern military integrates and.
Well, maybe on the women fighting on the front lines, but I'm not so sure about the religious issue. We had Josh's Skype freeze up there a little bit, Terry, so I don't want to jump on him. We only have about 40 seconds before we go to the commercial break. But Josh, talking about those issues, I think we have him back. But guys, we only have about 30 seconds left before we step aside, but we can continue this conversation. We're going to ask Josh and Terry just to stick around. We're going to continue to talk about Chuck Hagel stepping down as the head of the Pentagon and who is going to replace him. And also, he is not the first one to possibly have some tension between him and that inner circle we talked about. Also, Robert Gates, Leon Panetta, we can't forget that, had some very public things to say about some of the trouble working with the Obama administration. Josh Orton and Terry Jeffery coming right back after this. Continue our conversation. I believe we've reestablished our Skype connection with Josh Orton, senior advisor at Progressives United, and Terry Jeffery, editor-in-chief of CNS News. Now, guys, I'll start with you, Terry, and we look at this. We know that there was somewhat of a contentious confirmation process for Chuck Hagel when he came through the Senate. We might not expect President Obama to want another fight given everything else that they have to deal with, including Obamacare, immigration, and the like. But do you expect this president to pick somebody who Republicans in the Senate Armed Services Committee might pass through pretty easily?
Well, honestly, I don't expect Senator McCain to put up any kind of serious resistance to that Obama nominee. He ought to. I don't think he won't. I would just quickly point out, Josh mentioned President Bush's strategy of nation building, which I think was fatuous and absurd, particularly in Iraq. This idea that he was going to establish a representative government after overthrowing Saddam Hussein was unwise, and it didn't work. But when President Obama came into office, he unilaterally decided to use military force to overthrow the regime of Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. He did it without congressional authorization. The outcome was predictable. We've seen the outcome. Even before the September 11, 2012 attack on our mission in Benghazi, the CIA was saying that eastern Libya was becoming a haven for terrorists and al-Qaeda, which it has in fact become. And before Chuck Hagel became defense secretary, he saw that. So he went into this administration being an intelligent guy, been around Washington a long time, had obviously a great deal of excellent experience with the military, yet he voluntarily agreed to become Obama's defense secretary and advance that agenda.
Well, Josh, why would President Obama, there's been a lot of talk about President Obama forcing out the defense secretary. Why would he want to do this, considering he has some other tough fights ahead of him with Congress?
Well, I do agree that he took the job voluntarily. It would be a little strange if he didn't. Look, I think that the Republicans this is going to be sort of an interesting divide because, as everyone knows, this is going to be the first confirmation hearing with Chairman John McCain. I'm not really sure whether or not there's anyone that basically anyone could nominate for Secretary of Defense besides John McCain and Lindsey Graham that John McCain would go for. So, I think this is going to be a bit interesting. I don't think that for Republicans who are concerned about international intervention and sending our men and women overseas and spending American taxpayer dollars to sort of intervene in every conflict.
Well, Ted Cruz floated the idea of maybe former Senator Joe Lieberman. What do you think?
Yes, which is both ludicrous and hilarious at the same time. If you want to see almost universal opposition from the Democratic Party, I would choose Joe Lieberman. If you want someone who isn't going to make the same mistakes in foreign policy of the last 14 years, I would choose someone else besides Joe Lieberman.
Yeah, but the Democrats won't be in charge on Capitol Hill come January. What do you think, Terry?
Well, I will point out that John McCain has been even more an aggressive advocate of U.S. military intervention in the Middle East when it did not necessarily serve U.S. interests than either President Bush or President Obama. Yet, despite that, I see no prospect that John McCain, at the end of the day, will not pass through his committee and then vote to confirm on the floor of the Senate whomever President Obama nominates as Secretary of Defense. McCain will confirm that person.
All right, well, then I guess we can expect, as we saw in that radio interview with John McCain, and probably more to come from Lindsey Graham as well, a lot of talk, a lot of bluster, and then, Terry, as you said, just a rubber stamp for the Obama administration when they get their next nominee to be the head at the Pentagon. Josh Orton Skyping in from Madison, Wisconsin. Terry Jeffery coming to us from Washington, D.C. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Chuck Hagel, that resignation announcement coming yesterday. We have much more to come here for you today on America's Forum. We're back right after this.